Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham. President Obama took a strong stand for religious liberty Thursday. Speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, the president focused his remarks on how the U.S. can encourage religious freedom in other countries. He also made a plea for Pastor Saeed Abedini that many Christians are applauding. White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon reports.
Calling it key to national security and a central tenet of American diplomacy, President Obama focused his remarks on religious freedom and publicly called for the release of Christian missionary Kenneth Bae, who is imprisoned in North Korea, and Pastor Saeed Abedini, imprisoned in Iran.
We pray for Pastor Saeed Abedini. He's been held in Iran for more than 18 months, sentenced to 8 years in prison on charges relating to his Christian beliefs. And as we continue to work for his freedom, today, again, we call on the Iranian government to release Pastor Abedini so he can return to the loving arms of his wife and children in Idaho.
The persecution of Christians has increased in some countries. North Korea leads the list that includes Iraq, Afghanistan, and America's ally, Saudi Arabia.
Honestly, we've been waiting for this. Last year, the number of Christians martyred for their faith doubled from the previous year. So it's been a mystery as to why it's taken this long. Nevertheless, we're excited and encouraged, I should say, that he has made a statement, a strong statement, I think, and hopefully we'll see some action on this point.
Diplomacy can be uncomfortable, the president says, especially when dealing with countries like China that are strategically and economically important to the U.S. The president says he stresses to Chinese leaders that China's potential rests on upholding universal rights, including rights for Christians. The commander-in-chief told the group of bipartisan lawmakers and policy shapers that he's thankful for God's guidance in his life, a faith journey that began with his work with churches as a community organizer.
I'm grateful not only because I was broke and the church fed me, but because it led to everything else. It led me to embrace Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. It led me to Michelle, the love of my life, and it blessed us with 2 extraordinary daughters.
Like religious persecution, poverty drains human dignity, according to Dr. Rajiv Shah. As the administrator for USAID, he's intimately associated with the world's woes and says by remaining devoted to faith, Christians can transform the world by helping to end extreme poverty.
Because this is now achievable, but only if all of us, from science, business, government, and faith, come together for the poor.
A woman who knows about overcoming shared her testimony. Hawaiian surfer Bethany Hamilton became a household name when she lost her left arm to a shark 10 years ago.
For many of us, it's easy to look at the things of this world to solve our challenges and the obstacles in life. But when we submit our lives to Christ, His grace, mercy, truth, peace, and love will bring true fulfillment to our lives.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
I want to turn now to new allegations. The Internal Revenue Service is targeting Tea Party and conservative groups. As Paul Strand reports, the agency is coming up with new rules aimed specifically at shutting down groups opposed to liberal policies.
Quietly over Thanksgiving, the IRS announced new rules that critics say would allow the agency to continue its tough targeting of Tea Party and other conservative groups. Lawyer Cleta Mitchell represented some of these groups when the IRS held up their tax-exempt status for years.
And subjected all of these groups to extreme scrutiny, burdensome questions. One of my clients received 102 questions from the IRS.
But Mitchell says what the IRS was doing quietly from 2009 to 13, it's now doing openly to the kind of 501c4 groups like most of the Tea Parties.
Now what the IRS is doing, it hasn't stopped, and in fact now the IRS in plain sight is trying to make permanent all of the awful things they were doing to Tea Party groups and now extend that to every 501c4 organization in America and to make it permanent. It's really quite dreadful. It is indeed targeted. They know who they're trying to shut up.
Why would they do this?
I think that the IRS is going to do everything it can to silence anybody in America who wants to talk about how elected officials voted on Obamacare. I actually believe that that is the fundamental reason for all of this effort.
Mitchell has filed a Freedom of Information request to find out if the White House, Treasury, and IRS have been colluding in these efforts to muzzle Tea Party and other conservative groups. But Treasury has been stalling weeks past the legal deadline in getting documents to Mitchell. Paul Strand, CBN News, the IRS.
Tea Party leaders testified before Congress Thursday about IRS targeting. Attorneys representing groups suing the IRS appeared before the panel. They claimed the agency harassed dozens of Tea Party and conservative groups and held up their tax-exempt status. They laughed off White House claims that top IRS officials did not specifically target conservative groups.
This wasn't an equal opportunity discrimination. This was targeted discrimination coming from the Internal Revenue Service. And what I'd like to address now is that our view is that that determination came from the highest ranks of the Internal Revenue Service.
They also contradicted claims the FBI is actively investigating the situation. 13 government agents are supposedly looking into it, but those agents haven't contacted any Tea Party officials in the groups allegedly targeted. Immigration reform will not come before this fall's elections. That is the latest projection from House Speaker John Boehner, and it comes just 1 week after House Republican leaders unveil broad principles for immigration changes, including legal status for the country's estimated 11 million illegal immigrants. Boehner said there is simply too much skepticism about whether the president would properly enforce any reforms Congress approved.
The president seems to change the health care law on a whim whenever he likes. Now he's running around the country telling everyone that he's going to keep acting on his own. Keeps talking about his phone and his pen. And he's feeding more distrust about whether he's committed to the rule of law. Listen, there's widespread doubt about whether this administration can be trusted to enforce our laws. And it's going to be difficult to move any immigration legislation until that changes.
Republican Congressman Paul Ryan and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell have also said passing a bill this year is unlikely. Hundreds of thousands of people are still without power after the major snow and ice storm that hit the mid-Atlantic this week. Nearly 500,000 residents in Pennsylvania and Maryland are in the dark and the cold. As Mark Martin reports, it could be several days before that power comes back.
90-year-old Evelyn Ovens had been sitting in the cold in her Pennsylvania home with her dog Sporty for 9 hours.
But I was getting colder and colder by the minute.
So without a phone and heat, Evelyn had an idea. She put this sign on her door.
I got a big piece of cardboard and I wrote on there, "Help me," and I put it out on the porch of my storm door.
It had been several hours since Paul Bailey was able to get in touch with his elderly aunt, so he called police.
So then I just thought something ain't right.
Paul wasn't sure of her exact address, so for almost 4 hours, the chief of police drove around downed trees and traveled on closed roads until Evelyn's sign caught his eye.
Because you know somebody's there to help you, and that's a good feeling.
Another good feeling, utility crews from as far away as Canada and Arkansas continue working to restore power in the mid-Atlantic after trees and limbs were no match for the ice. The Philadelphia area has most of the outages, nearly 300,000 customers. Many residents are fortunate to wait it out in a hotel. Last night, the Gibbs family huddled by the fireplace in their Pennsylvania home.
It was really, really tough. My husband was brilliant. He grabbed a mattress and brought it down to the front of the fireplace with one kid on either couch.
Nearly 200 people spent the night in Red Cross shelters. Crews hope to have power restored for many people by the end of the day. Mark Martin, CBN News.
The American Civil Liberties Union is suing Los Angeles County leaders over the decision to display a cross on the county's official seal. That seal is displayed on buildings, official written communications. The ACLU claims the religious symbol violates separation of church and state. County supervisors voted last month to put the cross back on the seal to make the San Gabriel mission depiction historically and architecturally accurate. The original seal had a cross over the Hollywood Bowl, but it was removed 10 years ago after the ACLU threatened to sue. 2013 was the best year for nonprofit fundraising since the Great Recession. That is according to Blackbaud's charitable giving report. Overall, charitable giving grew 5% in 2013, with online giving growing almost 14%. Online giving to faith-based organizations grew the most. Large organizations had the greatest increase overall with charitable giving, while small organizations had the greatest increase in online giving. The Blackbaud Index tracks U.S.-based charitable giving for more than 4,000 organizations on a monthly basis. Coming up, Congress won't overturn it. The president won't change it. But that doesn't mean you can't beat it. Find out how to survive Obamacare. Coming up next. The Obama administration is aggressively pursuing young, healthy adults to enroll in Obamacare. Participation from the so-called young Invincibles is crucial to the program's success. According to a poll by the Kaiser Family Foundation, about 40% of those who enroll need to be young and healthy to balance the higher cost of insuring older and sicker people. But many young adults are opting out of the high cost they'll have to pay for coverage under the president's health care law. A Gallup poll found 26% of uninsured people under the age of 30 intend to simply pay the $95 fine rather than to enroll. The deadline is March 31st. President Obama promised his new health care plan would help Americans. Instead, it's created so many problems, much of it has been put on hold for now, but it is still the law of the land. So Lori Johnson sat down with one person who knows Obamacare inside and out, and she got some tips on how to avoid its pitfalls.
Obamacare has been around in one form or another for over 3 years now, and most Americans still don't know what it means for them and their families. That included much of Congress.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Betsy McCoy, however, read it and understands it. In her new book, Beating Obamacare 2014, she spells out how to brace ourselves for what's ahead. Over half of Obamacare is paid for with cuts to Medicare, mostly what Medicare pays hospitals. One result, hospitals will cut back on nurses.
So no matter what age you are, if you're going into the hospital, be aware you're going to get a lower standard of care. And when you press that button for help, you're going to have to wait longer.
So if you know you're entering the hospital, you could hire a private duty nurse, at least for the first night or two.
All the doctors, especially surgeons, but generally all doctors keep a list of private duty nurses they prefer. The hospital also has a list of agencies with which they deal, so the nurses they call will be very familiar with the routine of that hospital.
Those Medicare cuts will also hit individual doctors as their reimbursements for treating their Medicare patients will drop, so plan ahead.
If you're in your mid-50s, late 50s, early 60s, line up your doctors now, a cardiologist and an internist, even if you're healthy. Because if you don't, when you turn 65 and go on Medicare, you won't be able to find a doctor willing to take you on as a new patient.
We all confide things to our doctor that we wouldn't tell anyone else. But under Obamacare, doctors enter all that private information in a computer. And recent headlines highlight the problem that private information on the web can fall into the wrong hands.
You ought to talk to your doctor about keeping 2 sets of books so that there are certain things that just stay in that office. That's the way it always used to be when doctors kept paper records. And just give your doctor a heads up. Your doctor will appreciate it because doctors take the Hippocratic Oath. And that oath means keeping your confidences private.
This year, an estimated 25 million people will lose the health insurance they have through work. Employers won't be able to afford the new small group plans that contain all of the benefits the government requires. So don't be caught off guard.
Go talk to your Human Resources Division now, or your boss, or if you're just part of a small group, talk among yourselves and find out whether this is going to happen. There's nothing worse than being clobbered by surprise.
If your company insurance goes away, you'll need to budget more for health care.
Be aware that if you are forced to go to the exchange, you're going to pay much, much more and get less in return.
It might be cheaper to choose coverage that doesn't meet the government requirements and pay the penalty.
Talk to an insurance agent and see whether that's a viable alternative for you. For example, if you try to get high deductible insurance or a plan that doesn't meet the 10 essential benefits, but has everything you want.
Although Obamacare is the law of the land, McCoy says it's not too late for a motivated Congress to repeal it.
Then in the future, when we have better people in Congress, replace it with targeted help for the uninsured. And you know what that will do? It will leave the rest of us alone.
And finally, McCoy says people of faith need to fight back.
This law is part of a much broader, and I'm sad to say it, a broader assault on our ability to worship. And not just worship in church, but more importantly, to practice our faith in our everyday lives. There's a big assault on religion. And I think we have to take a stand at this point and say, if you like your God, you can keep your God.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Up next, waging war against his own people. Why Sudan's President Omar Bashir has been bombing Christians and black Africans. In Sudan, the Islamist government is stepping up attacks against Christians and black Africans in the Nuba Mountains. As Gary Lane reports, the violence is part of President Omar al-Bashir's decades-long pursuit of ethnic and religious cleansing.
Sudan's Nuba Mountains used to be a serene place, one where Muslims and Christians lived side by side in peace, eking out a living from farming. But this is their experience in 2014. For more than 2 decades, Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir has waged war against the people of the Nubas and South Kordofan state. Muslims and Christians alike have resisted his efforts to Arabize and Islamize them. They believe he sees them as infidels. He wants to kill them and seize their oil. Sudanese Christian human rights activist Namia Ibrahim Shaloka says many Americans mistakenly believe that fighting ended in the Nubas when South Sudan gained independence nearly 3 years ago. He says the opposite is true. The war against his people is escalating.
Every day is daily air bombardment, destroying the school, even the facilities, health centers, churches, and everything.
According to the news service Nuba Reports, Sudan government bombings in the Nuba Mountains increased from 28 in November 2013 to at least 120 just 2 months later. Late last month, a barrage of 48 rockets hit a school and near the marketplace in the city of Kauda. While no one was killed, the Nubans were alarmed by Bashir's new preferred method of attack, parachute bombs. Parachute bombs are more deadly because they're much quieter and less noticeable when they fall from the sky.
It's just like totally focusing to destroy the life of the people, and they target even the civilians. They don't focus in anything else. This is the situation.
Religious freedom advocate Tina Ramirez of the nonprofit group Hardwired says Sudanese President Bashir is at the heart of every Sudan conflict, from Darfur to the Nuba Mountains and the Blue Nile.
The conflict is not between Muslims and Christians, it's between Bashir and his version of Islam that's extremely oppressive and everybody else in Sudan. And that includes South Sudan. So he's constantly pitting groups off of each other and instigating problems even in South Sudan.
The International Criminal Court has issued a warrant against Bashir for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So far, the Sudanese president has avoided arrest.
And we're not doing anything to bring him in. So what can we do as the U.S.?
As the church or as non-government organizations, we can come alongside the people of Sudan to ensure that they have the training to articulate true human rights and freedom and to have a constitution that really respects that for everyone. Without religious freedom, there will be no peace in Sudan.
For Christians and Muslims alike, from Khartoum south to the Nuba Mountains. Gary Lane, CBN News.
And for more from Gary, make sure you check out his blog, The Global Lane. You can find it at our website, cbnnews.com. The weekend is here, and that means it is time for family-friendly movie reviews with Bob Waliszewski. He's director of Focus on the Family's entertainment review department called Plugged In Online. Well, Bob, let's start with the new Lego movie. How does that look? Is it friendly for children?
It is. This one, this week, Hollywood's given us something we can take the kids, and even adults will like it. It focuses on a Lego character named Emmett. He meets a girl one day who thinks he's not only special, but something called the Special. Takes him to a wizard-like character who agrees, and they all seem to think that he is something more than mediocre, and he's determined that if they believe it, then he's going to act like it. 4.5 out of 5, knocked down just a little for some silly lowball gags. The basic message of this film is you've been given an imagination. It's a blessing. Use it and enjoy. Kind of a cute little film.
The story of Lego, indeed. Thank you so much. Well, how about George Clooney's new World War II movie called Monuments Men? Is that one family friendly?
And Matt Damon's in it, and Bill Murray's in it, Kate Blanchett's in it. This is the movie so far this year, my favorite film that I still can't wholeheartedly recommend for families. It's based on a true story set in World War II. Hitler issues a decree to destroy all the stolen art. And these select group of people, actually in real life there were 350 of them, in the movie there's 6, began to go behind the lines, get in war shape, and try to do what they can to salvage the great works of art. The reason why I can't wholeheartedly endorse this film, however, is quite a bit of language, including a dozen misuses of God and Jesus, which, again, for our audience, for myself personally, it is fingernails down a chalkboard.
Yeah.
So
I saw it, and I concur. Thank you so much.
You bet, Ephraim. Talk to you next week.
And that is going to do it now for CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a fabulous Friday and a wonderful weekend, everybody.